So, how do we really know what happened in the past? This is a very tricky question. Some say that history tells us, but what is history? History is the reflection of a particular view of the past, and usually the view of the rich and powerful. So how do we get the full picture? Well, unfortunately we never really can, but we can try. If we really want to know, we can start by learning the history. Then we need to make sure that that history is true. This is also almost impossible, but part of the picture of the past comes from archives. Archives are documents that tell us what happened, like census records, tax records, letters written, and things like that. But these also only give us a piece of the puzzle. To help, we also have archaeology. Archaeology is the study of material culture, or the study of stuff. It can be modern stuff, historical stuff, or stuff from the ancient past. The way that people use this stuff tells us something about them. So, in looking at what we know from history, and then looking at the documents from history, and then looking at the stuff, we can get a better picture of what actually happened. In this video, we will go from the history to the archives to the actual field where we try and see the life of Madam Walker as she knew it.
Introduction to Madam Walker as a child was in everyday kinds of ways. The silverware that we used every day had her monogram on it. When I started really doing my research on her, I began to discover other things about her. She also was very much a philanthropist, a political activist, an anti-lynching activist, a patron of the arts. I was able to find some things actually at the National Archives. When I first got here, I really didn't know what I was going to find with, well, voila. I went through Southern Claims Commission papers and in fact found that R.W. Birney, the owner of the plantation where Madam Walker was born and where her parents had been slaves, had in fact filed to get reimbursed for timber that had been cut down on his land. Sherman and Grant had used that plantation as a staging area for the Union Army as they were trying to take over Vicksburg, which the Confederacy controlled. So I found also the fact that a hospital was on the plantation. But to actually be able to look at the reports from the hospital and to see how many people had died and who was sick and what the weather was like, it made the plantation come alive for me. There's also this very interesting document, January 29th, 1864, a number of people who were sick who are in the freedmen's camp. So there must have been a freedmen's camp in addition to the camp for the soldiers, and it lists the names of the freed persons who were sick. Riley, age 1, Lucy Limney, age 35, James Norton, 56, Carolyn Youngblood, 33, Felina, no last name, 5. It gave me sort of an emotional connection to it, to be able to touch the papers. For my family, there was, people think, oh, you know, they're famous and you can find out a lot about them. Yes, I can find out a lot about them after they became famous, but the first 38 years of her life, it was really just digging and digging and digging and not giving up. In an amazing way, a little bit of a document here and a little bit of a document there, you can really pull together the story. One of the biggest surprises to me, more National Archives records, there were War Department records that showed that she had been spied upon by a black spy who was working for the War Department, who was looking for what they called subversive Negroes. They basically wanted civil rights, and so they were rocking the boat. So I loved that discovery. One of the wonderful things about the way the American government collected records through the years is that everybody's family is in the National Archives.
So when looking at archaeology, how has the archaeology of Madam Walker's site either contributed to history or built a deeper knowledge of Indianapolis?
Well, first of all, it tells us a lot about a changing period in Indianapolis history. Because when we talk about the Near West Side historically, it's always been about the fact that it was an African American community. Everywhere that we come over here on the Near West Side, whether we're talking about IUPUI, Ransom Place, that's the typical story that's been put out. But the fact is, what we're learning now is more about that immigrant population that lived here, as well as the African American population. Because yes, there were people who were African American living in and around this area, always have been. But it was a neighborhood that was very mixed, that had people from different backgrounds coming together, working together, and they weren't concerned with black and white relations. They were concerned about survival.
Yeah.
And so that's the big thing we're learning about here, is we're getting an understanding of just what it is these people were going through day by day.
So how do you see, as rather than archaeology being just a piece of history, how do you see archaeology just becoming its own within this, especially in the aspect of historical archaeology?
Well, when you think about it, historical archaeology is the melding of traditional archaeological methods along with cultural anthropology and the study of history, using historical documents and records to look at how, and looking at them, and then going to do the archaeology, see what we can recover, what material culture is left behind that's going to either refute the histories as they've been written or corroborate them. I mean, the whole idea of doing archaeology is to find the truth.
Okay.
And the truth is always that little nebulous area somewhere in the middle. You know, if you look at most historical documents, there's multiple sides to every historical history. Remember, history is his story. The idea is someone's story.
Yeah.
And typically you've got multiple viewpoints, and somewhere amongst all those viewpoints is the actual true story.
Right.
With archaeology, we can help to narrow it down and more focus it. Because we can look and say, well, if we know this is where people live and this is what they were supposed to be doing, what material evidence have they left behind of what was going on? I had a professor who once told me that when you look at archaeology, when you look at anthropology, what is it? It's actually the science of history. Basically, most history is based upon just the written books and resources left behind. But with archaeology, you can take it one step further. We can actually go through and create theories and test them. We can actually use science to better understand the history and see just how reliable that written record is. Narrow down what's going on in a city like Indianapolis.
Yeah.
To better understand how it's changed over time and how the effects of those change affect the people who live in that community.
Just ripples throughout the community.
If you can talk to constituent societies, if you can talk to descendants of people who were involved with certain things, you can get a better understanding of how they may have thought about it. And so therefore you get more of the story, more of the different facets of the story to build a fuller story. Not necessarily the real history, but a fuller history.
Okay.
The memories are real, this whole side of their life is real.
Yeah.
And as long as we embrace the fact that we can get these cherished memories, record them, we can always keep it real.
Yeah.
And so it gives you a history that's more complete.
Yeah. And engages, I mean, it creates meaning, right, for the community
Well,
now.
it creates meaning for the community now, and it creates meaning for the community into the future.
Yeah.
Because community doesn't go away. Community may change, but the meaning that we need to derive from community is what we get from the stories people tell us.
Okay.
You know, and that's what it's all about. That's really what history is about. That's what archaeology is about, is getting that sense of a story.
Yeah.
So we can reconnect with the community.
Almost like a living history, something of that nature.
Oh, it's very. I would say it can be a definitive living history, but at the same time, it's a history that's been lived.
Yeah.